Hello, this is just a brief video to go over a couple of the questions I got this week regarding Chapter 5. I have updated the Cengage settings, so you should be able to see all the feedback from your Chapter 5 work in Cengage, and if you can't see that, I need you to email me so I can update the settings. I had a lot of people take advantage of doing the homework and getting the solutions to the questions in the book, and as a result, the scores were quite high in Cengage this week, and I was very happy to see that. Seems like you guys understand it pretty well. A few of you are struggling a bit, so that's what this video is for. I'll try to keep it brief, but go over everything that kind of seems to be stumping a few of you guys. So, if you go to your textbook on page 5-33, which is problem 5-2A, I had a student complete all of these, and I went through her work to see which one she was getting wrong, and this is a common mistake, so that's why I picked this problem. So this one, take a few seconds, put me on pause and read it. It is about Peyton's company payroll for the year. Put me on pause, and when you're done reading the question, resume play. All right, for this one, the first thing we have to do is determine what exactly the taxable wages would be, or the wages that are subject to the tax. And in order to do that, we need to take the whole payroll of $737,910 and subtract the $472,120 because those were the wages that were in excess of $7,000. When you do that, you'll have $265,790, and then you should be able to do a straightforward calculation for the federal and state taxes. The 6%, or I'm sorry, the 0.06%, 0.006, so it's too early, haven't had coffee, would equal $1,594. And then it gives you what the company's state rate is in the problem of 2.9%, so that's 0.029, and that's how you get the state and federal. You would combine those for the total of $9,302.65 for your total unemployment taxes. In problem 5-6A, and this one, I understand why it stumped people, because there were a lot of wages thrown at you, and you had to figure out which ones were included and which ones weren't. So the first thing you need to do is figure out which wages would not be subject to state and federal unemployment. And if you go to pages 5.3 and 5.4 in your textbook, there's a big long list that you can go through and look at. In this example, put me on pause if you need to read it. In this example, out of those wages presented, we would exclude the director's salary, the non-taxable portion of the president's and vice president's salaries, and the pre-tax cafeteria plan contributions. They would not be subject to the tax. And that would look like this. It tells us in the problem that the director's salary was $9,000, and it also tells us that the pre-tax cafeteria plan contributions were $2,000, so those are kind of easy. But you actually have to calculate the president's and vice president's salary. So you have to, again, take away that first $7,000. And the amount that would be taxable for the president's salary, because it tells us that his pay was $20,000, would be $13,000. And the amount for the vice president would be $8,000. So once you've determined that these should all be excluded, you would add them all up, and they would equal $23,900. The problem tells you that the total wages are $177,600, so we take away the $23,900 that are excluded, and we have a taxable wage amount of $153,710. And then we go ahead and multiply it by our percentages for the federal and state rates. So the federal would be $922.26. and the state would be $5,379.85. If you go to problem 5-7A on page 5-34, so the next problem, This one deals with a company that deals with multiple states. And the first part of the problem shouldn't have been too challenging. What Nebraska, if you look at the problem, Nebraska would only the wages that were paid in Nebraska would be subject to unemployment in the state of Nebraska, and only the wages paid in Ohio would be subject to Ohio's unemployment tax. So it tells you that the $2,800 were paid in Nebraska, and it also tells you that Nebraska's rate was 3.2%. So Nebraska would get $89.60. All the rest of the wages were paid in Ohio. There were a total of $9,000. And so you subtract that from 2,800, and you're going to have 6,200, and that was Ohio's part. And the book tells you that their tax rate was 3.8%, so that's why we multiply it by 0.038. And so you would write a check to Ohio for $235.60. Now the federal is a little different. The federal, we look at that 7,000 times the 0.006 would be 42. But it doesn't stop there, because it tells us in Part C, it says that Ohio is a credit reduction state. And what you should know by now is that a credit reduction state means that they have had outstanding loan balances as a state for 2 years now. So all the employers have to pay additional percentage until that balance is paid off. So in this case, since they have a credit reduction of 0.9%, we have to take 6,200. That was the amount that was paid in Ohio, remember, times the 0.009, and pay an additional $55.80 to make up for that credit reduction. So the total amount that would go to the federal would be 42 plus the $55.80, a total of $79.80. And a lot of states are subject to credit reduction right now, with so many people having been unemployed and those benefits having extended past a normal rate. There was also a question about Cengage problem number 9. Let's see if I have my notes here. And this was the problem with Sanchez's company. Sanchez Company. And I think what might have stumped the person who had emailed about this was trying to figure out what the smallest contribution in order to affect a change in its tax rate. I think she got that part right, actually. It tells you in the problem that they have a negative balance of 1,240. So the minimum that they would need to do to have any change in their tax rate would be to pay that off. Because if they don't pay that off, if they don't pay that 1,240, they are going to be subject to a higher tax percentage of 7.2% from there on out. So if they pay the 1,240, then their reserve ratio would drop to 0, and they would have a lower tax rate. Their contribution rate would be 6.7% based on the table that was given to you in the problem. So here's what it would kind of look like, and this is part B of the problem. If they didn't elect to voluntarily contribute, they would pay 7.2%, because that's what it says. It says that the unemployment compensation law of the state provides that the tax rate of an employer who has a negative balance on the computation date shall be 7.2% during the following calendar year. It also tells you that their payroll is $611,000. So if they did not make a contribution, they would have to pay, if they did not make a voluntary contribution to bring that count up to 0, they would pay $43,992 the next year. But if they decided to make a voluntary contribution, their reserve rate would be 0. The reserve ratio would be 0. And if you look at that contribution rate schedule in the problem, that contribution rate would be 6.7%. So if they went ahead and made that full contribution of 1,240 voluntarily to bring their reserve ratio down to 0, or up to 0, I should say, instead of being negative, they would only have to pay $40,937. So you could say that without the contribution, the following year, they were going to be contributing 43,992. With the contribution, it would be 40,937. That would be a tax decrease of 3,055, but you can't stop there. If you want to think about, you have to think about the contribution that they actually made in order to have that contribution rate. So that was the 1,240. So in the end, you'd have to subtract that from the tax decrease, and their total tax savings, if they voluntarily make that contribution, would be 1,815. So I hope that helps you a little bit. If you guys have other questions, please email me. I'm here to help, and I try to do videos. I try to do what I can. Again, I did have someone had asked about problem 9, and I don't have time this morning to prepare a PowerPoint for it, but like I said, the solution should be in Cengage, and hopefully that will walk you through the logic that went into problem 9. If you still don't understand problem 9, please email me, and I'll make an additional video. Have a great weekend. I will try my best to email you this weekend. I will be out of town for a swim meet, but I will be home in the mornings, and I'll definitely be able to help on Monday. I'll also be on campus on Monday, so if you want to meet with me, please send me a text message to my cell phone number, which is 252-646-8865. Again, that's 252-646-8865. Send me a text and tell me if you'd like to meet. I'm available between 8:30 and 9:30, and then again after 11:50 to about 2. So hopefully one of those times would work for you. All right, take care.